Welcome to the CTO Studio. I have an incredible guest all the way from South Africa, Timothy Maurice Webster. You're not going to believe this, so I'm going to ask you to watch this. Just listen.
Well, I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Timothy Webster, welcome to the CTO Studio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Do you know what a CTO Studio is?
Well, now, here's what I think it is. It's you just hanging out with some friends.
Nailed it. Yeah. Although Eric and I had a long, hard process if we should have the word CTO in it.
Really? Just should have been
Etienne Hangs.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful branding stuff, which is my thing, right? So,
which I want to get into hard.
Cool. Let's do it.
So you are fresh from the flight from South Africa.
I am.
So now you are an interesting phenomenon because you're an American living in South Africa.
Yeah, it's like this whole African-American authenticity now. Like I always felt living in America, growing up in America, I had never been to Africa, so I didn't really feel African. Now I feel African.
What's it like? I often wonder, we have friends who, they're Vietnamese, they were born here, but they were raised in a French household, so they are fluent in French. But when they go to Vietnam, they can't speak the language, they look the same, but they obviously are not. What's it like for you being in South Africa as an American?
It's weird because, as you know, South Africa has really interesting dynamics around this colored people. So some people assume I'm kind of mixed. And
which, for people's reference, colored people is a term in South Africa.
Yeah, in South Africa, you've got this mixed population that call themselves colored very proudly. And so, as you know, if you say colored in America, you could go to jail, basically. So, you've got those dynamics. And South Africa is so diverse that, it's really helped me evolve, actually, because if I look at my work around sort of the neuroscience of identity and marketing and branding, consumer behavior, the idea of South Africa's diversity has forced me to work extra hard to really sort of understand the complexity around how identity impacts behavior, all of this sort of stuff. So it's been a lesson of growth and it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's been a special experience.
And what was the opportunity that got you there?
So I dated, let me just be blunt. I dated one of Nelson Mandela's granddaughters for like 10 years. And, it's interesting because, remember the World Cup, the 2007 World Cup? I watched it with him. He wanted his grandkids.
You're going to make me cry.
Listen, he wanted his grandkids because he knew he was ailing. He wanted to watch this World Cup and he knew it was his last World Cup.
Wow.
He wanted to watch it with his grandkids. Now, his grandkids were kind of crazy and all over the place. And I don't say that lightly. They'll laugh when they hear this if they watch this, but they didn't really want to watch it with him, so they went out back. So I was sitting there with like 3 other people watching the world, and it was weird. We were sharing the same cup holder, and what do you do? So he had his feet up on the couch, and he had his 2 great grandkids next to him, and I was on his left, and I was terrified. Like if someone scores, what do you do? You can't high five him, right? It was a surreal experience on so many levels. And having access to people like him has shaped my experience in South Africa, which is, why I mentioned that, is that being able to sort of see how much people like him believed in humanity and human behavior and understanding of people is why I decided to base myself there. And it's just defined my perspective and purview on the country.
That is, I did not expect that.
I don't talk about it much. But I'm here with you.
Thank you. My wife met him because her dad was in the ANC government, and and Nelson Mandela came to their farm in the Free State.
Wow.
And Catherine, to this day, when she talks about that moment where she met him, it's too much.
It's transformative. There's something about his presence, and beyond just the story, he's interested. He probably looked at her and genuinely wanted to know who she was. That's what was so special about her.
And when you watched the game with him, it wasn't at the stadium, right? Was it on TV?
Yeah, remember that 2007? I think
it in England or
it was France or somewhere.
Okay,
yeah. And
so we won that World Cup, right?
We did.
So how did you celebrate with him?
So when it was a couple minutes to go and it was clear South Africa was going to win, there was no chance of losing. His assistant Zelda Legrand, who was his longtime assistant, who's also written a book about our story. So if you don't know, go read her book. It's incredible. She came to escort him up to his room, and it was just kind of everything stopped. And you had this kind of feeling that you've just watched his final World Cup that he'll see. And it was, I probably was the only one in the room who was thinking about this, because I think when you are, family of someone, you don't really appreciate probably that gravity. But I think as an American coming there, I knew, first of all, the only reason I'm here is because, him. So it was, even now when I haven't really thought about this, and I don't talk about it much, but I'm realizing more and more that, I shouldn't take those things for granted, and I probably should share a bit more. And
sharing it, I feel like you've just given me a gift, and it's, I think you're sharing it with such respect and humility that it's a very, very powerful spotlight on him.
After the conversation, I'll show you a photo where the woman that I was with, his sister. So I'm in a photo with him, Winnie, and Graça. I think it's one of the only photos, a family photo, where he was with Winnie and Graça, and people don't realize that Winnie and Graça were very close. And they spent a lot of time in their home in Houghton together, in Johannesburg. And he managed that dynamic extremely well. You remember, Winnie's not she wasn't the easiest person, but he just had this ability with people, whether it's with his family or anyone else, that was just remarkable. And it just sort of inspired me. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about how my work can be moved and inspired by his journey.
I went to the Nelson Mandela's house in Soweto, mostly Winnie's house, because that's where she lived with her children while Mandela was in prison. And, I sort of had this media frenzied disdain for Winnie that was just purely based on what I was seeing in the news. And when I went to that house, I completely changed, because seeing what she was subjected to, the police brutality, the random shots fired, and the tour guide would explain what she would do to survive random acts of violence from police towards her, and where she would hide her children. They showed sort of the bullet holes, and honestly, to live through that, I mean, it's the sympathy and the emotion I felt for her as just a mother.
A mother, right?
I deeply, respected her after that.
So one of the things that I do, and I'll link it back for those watching not really interested in South Africa.
That's okay. They can tune in next week.
I'll link it into my work. So I helped her. So I went to her and I said, look, you went to the Winnie Mandela. Remember, I was dating her granddaughter.
I mean, that is information you should have written.
And I said, we should think about rebranding you. And, I hate to use the word brand alongside iconic people, but the reason why I thought this was important was because I felt that people didn't know the things that you're speaking about now. And so initially I pitched to my publisher a book about her as a grandmother, and then it evolved. And then eventually what came out was the book about when she was in prison called 491 Days. So that was a product of us trying to shift her reputation because she didn't care. And what that was inspired by was when Nelson Mandela at 89 asked for a rebranding himself. He went to his foundation and he says that my name has evolved into a myth and I'm not happy with it. People know me as a guy who takes pictures with celebrities like Richard Branson, Naomi Campbell, and people have forgotten what I stand for. So he says, I want to be rebranded. So what he commissioned his foundation to change how people saw him. And I had studied that closely. And what he did was he says, remove my face off of everything and use my hand as a symbol. So if you go look at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, you'll see that everything is about his hand as a sign and a symbol for caring and giving and loving. And so he says, my face was in the way. So if you decide to rebrand this podcast, don't use your face. That's a sign of ego.
That was a terrible punchline. Terrible. You had such a solid thing going there, and you just completely fucked it up. We're gonna just no.
You can edit that out.
No. There's no editing.
There's no editing. This is
editing.
Oh wow. Okay.
What we do is we afford you the luxury of listening to it and telling us if it's good to go.
All right, we're good.
But
so
I'm
far.
sorry. So far, there's not. We're taking this hard. Oh my goodness! And so you were sort of talking about Winnie's desire to rebrand, or you suggested to her to rebrand.
Yeah, it's a family thing. I said to the family, it will be a shame if she dies under this idea of a narrow kind of narrative that's been thrust because of political agenda, because of, a number of things. So the family sort of internally, there's one of the granddaughters named Swati, Zama Swati, took over that project and led it, and Pam McMillan, who published my second book, are the ones who really got behind it and really made sure that this was a success.
And do you think that I feel like the country softened towards it?
They did. They definitely did. And it was part of it. I think some of it was just kind of mortality and the idea that, a mother is that old.
It's amazing how we are young lions and everything has to change and everything is terrible until it's fixed, and then you grow old.
Yeah.
And then, and that's where I think where Madiba was just the way in which he aged, so graceful, and then of course the rest is history, unfortunately, right?
Can I give you one more sort of behind the scene thing?
Dying for it.
So all the celebrities used to come to South Africa to want to get a photo with Mandela. That's a big thing, right? It's like somehow you're sitting in the UK or you're sitting in Japan, if you're a celebrity in Japan or wherever you are, and in your mind, I'm so significant, I deserve a photo with this man. Meanwhile, no matter how many millions and billions of people know you, you're no one next to Nelson Mandela, right? It may be not, when I say no one, meaning the gravity of you and your hit song, really. I mean,
your 1 million followers on Instagram, meaningless.
So what he used to do was he would get his grandkids to go entertain them when they come, so they can feel like they're connecting. And then at the very end, when it was time to give the foundation money, he would come out for the photo, shake their hand, and leave. He was smart. So I remember I got a chance to meet Beyonce and JayZ. Beyonce.
Okay, so you just said, if I remember correctly, that you met Beyonce and JayZ.
So let me tell you the story. So
who is this guy? Dude, there's like one sentence answers to my questions, and it's like nothing.
Well, this makes the interview far more interesting.
It, man. Wow.
So Beyonce comes out super nervous because she's about to meet Nelson Mandela. So I get a chance to meet Beyonce unguarded, unfiltered. Like, she is looking at us like, oh my God.
Like, where do I go? What do I say?
And even JayZ. Remember, JayZ is like a proper hip hop street guy, and he has a tailored suit on, Glen Plaid, British Royal, type of, they've shown up to meet.
Show
and now,
up.
and now they're stuck with these random grandkids and a future in-law who is irrelevant.
And the grandkids show no respect.
Like none. Like they look, we want a photo. So it was the most awkward dynamic. But in my first book, I had mentioned Beyonce as a brand. And so I had brought my book because this is my moment. I'm going to take a photo with Beyonce. And
I'm going to take a photo with the person who's going to take the photo with the person who's taking the photo. That's me. I'm like, hey, can I have a photo with you?
So I get my photo. And the guy who took the photo didn't really like me. I swear, I can't make this up. This guy didn't really like me. So I look at the photo. It's epic. Beyonce has like her cheek on mine. She's just completely, and she like in my book where I signed for her, this guy, so there's a lot more photos. He deletes the photo. So all I have now
is a hard copy.
No. All I have now is this photo where there's just a group of us. And because I knew who was taking the photo from my camera, I'm looking there, but everybody else is looking here. So now I look desperate and ridiculous. And I've got this epic photo that was deleted. And I don't
know. And when you say deleted, like literally no one's seen it. Well, it's gone.
So two people saw it and everybody was just like overwhelmed that she melted. Because remember, back then, it was 2008. Back then, she was just coming into like her own. And to have somebody write about her as a serious business person versus a sex symbol, she was moved by that. In fact, when they were leaving in the limo, she pulled down the window and she put the book out the window and shook it like, thank you. And, and I feel like this guy, by the way, I'm getting emotional because I want to go and shoot this guy.
Eric's got connections.
Yeah, you guys technology people. I'm sure you can retrieve this photo.
Connections.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about that.
Wow. Timothy, that's a profound story. So how long would he leave people with his grandkids?
He would leave them. They would be at least an hour.
An hour. And then would he show up, take the photo, and then leave?
He would show up. So remember, his foundation is probably a half mile from his home.
And this is in Houghton, in Joburg, okay? Yeah.
So, I mean, it's funny because every so often there would be a celebrity like 50 Cent, who I don't think he really wanted to meet. So he would leave the grandkids for the whole day with them. And then they would call me and be like, you want 50 Cent is in town. You want to meet 50? I'm like, nah, I'm good. True story. So I would look at the list of who's coming and be like, I don't want a photo with that.
Do you think South Africa couldn't handle his departure?
I don't think people weren't ready for it.
I was at his 4666 for one of the concerts in Johannesburg. I think it was an anniversary of his release, which is his prison number. And he came out onto the stage. And it was unexpected because no one there expected him to come, even though they were celebrating him. And I tell you what, we must have been about 60, 70,000 people jammed into Johannesburg Stadium or Ellis Park, I forget which one. And I tell you what, there was a palpable silence when he walked. There was a cheering, but for that split second before people realized what was going on, you could just feel like there was something in that stadium right now that was just larger than life.
I experienced that. What he stood for symbolically, people weren't ready for that to go with him. And they weren't ready for, everyone likes to believe that inside of us, there's this deeper sort of gravity, the potential to do good, the potential to be a better person. And I think that based on the way the brain works, we create these kind of patterns in our mind. So me plus Mandela equals I'm better. I can do more. So when you remove him from that pattern or that formula, you're kind of reduced in some way. And if you think about how principles like there's a principle in South Africa called Ubuntu, this idea that I am because you are. So if you look at John Donne's poet, No Man is an Island, he says, based on that kind of principle of Ubuntu, if someone in your community dies, part of you dies. And I genuinely feel that people felt like their greatest hopes for their better self was passing. And that's complicated when you are so connected to something so significant. And, like in Japan, there's no word for I. It says I'm a portion of. So if a portion of me that's so significant passes, no one could be ready for that. You're not ready to kind of bury your own hopes.
And you don't just move on from that.
No.
I remember when he passed how, we had essentially left South Africa many years ago. And man, when news came of his passing, it was, I feel like a part of me. And it's almost a cliche, but I did feel it. I felt almost a departure from me, like a thing just left.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the world, which is why so many heads of state showed up around the world. It's like, we want to represent the best of our country and the best of who we are, right?
That is a fascinating way to look at that. Well, I don't know what to talk about, man.
You don't want to.
I don't want to talk about anything else. So, so let's talk a little bit about. You're involved with CNBC? Is that?
Yeah. So let me share what my value chain is. Under brain and brand science, I do 3 things. I spend 30% of my time writing and researching about the relationship between what happens in the brain and consumer behavior and stories and branding. And then I share that in media. So I also have a podcast. It's not as sexy as yours, but I have a podcast.
Can I be on it?
Yeah, of course. I do some contributions where I'll do stories about various, topics like women's leadership, what's happening in gender equality. And then I do features in media, and I write for a number of publications such as Forbes, and then some local South African publications. and then I speak and share what I write about in conferences, which is what I'll be doing at C7 CTOs, 0111 conference. So that's my value chain. And so the media is just a way for me to share what I've been writing and researching about.
And so are you immersed then in the entrepreneurial scene then in South Africa, or the more political scene, or because women's leadership, entrepreneurialism, the tech scene, and then your work in sort of the neuroscience behind branding and all that. Is that the community then that you're engaged with predominantly?
No, it's more executives and sort of professionals that have a big stake in their identity and their reputation and so forth. So
okay, so then you're helping executives.
So I'm the guy behind the scenes that no one knows about on purpose. Like I'll work with the CEO of a bank, looking at how they sort of get their message across to their employees and their stakeholders.
So what would you say to the founder of 7 CTOs is the first thing that they should fix?
Well, I would say that I would actually look at it differently. I'd look at what you're already doing really well, such as this.
This guy's good, man.
Such as when I get your newsletter, it's not one of those that I delete. It's something I'm actually genuinely interested in, because you're bringing the community of your members really great insights and content. And so first of all, you're authentic because you represent your brand really well. I mean, you're bringing high-tech video stuff. I mean, imagine if you were just doing a random newsletter and that's it, right? Yeah. I'd struggle to take you seriously. So I would say continue to build on what you're already doing, and also you make it fun. You don't wear your intellect on your sleeve, etc. You don't wear your history. And that for me is interesting. I find people who are that sort of light, I respect them more because they're not hiding. You genuinely are anchored in what you're doing. So maximize on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you just did that to me because I wasn't prepared for your anecdotes that are like gospel. I mean, for me as a South African to know that you even spent time with him with Mandela puts you in a category for me of holy moly's, so you sort of saying, hey, so just so you know, I watched this game, I'll be honest about the granddaughter, and it's just, to me, that is extremely powerful whenever I meet anybody.
Sure.
So let's bring this back a little bit to the CTO type. And I apologize to everybody now for going to CTO stuff.
Wait, one more story.
There's a shit about CTOs right now. What are you seeing in terms of... So I have a big... part of the reason I have this podcast, part of the reason I have the O111 conference is because I want to help CTOs and brand themselves better. I'm not a branding expert, and I really struggle with my marketing and my how I even portray the 7 CTOs brand. But I'm very passionate, and that's why I'm so excited that you're closing the keynote on at the conference. What are you seeing around the reluctance that tech types have in branding themselves, and what do you think they need to be doing more of, given that they are generally more introverted, generally more skeptical, not necessarily comfortable with speaking about their accomplishments.
Sure.
And that's kind of frowned upon, kind of like you said, which if you're understated about where you're from and your history and your accomplishments, it almost makes you more attractive. But what do CTO types need to do to get out a little more and help with the branding? And why is it so important?
Well,
There's a lot there. Right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the best place to start is, where does branding come from? Like, why is there a need? I mean, there was no branding before branding came out of propaganda, which is what I find interesting about this question, is that the very idea of branding was about triggering and engineering desire. So Woodrow Wilson hired Sigmund Freud's nephew, who was basically a master at propaganda. And Woodrow Wilson said, I want you to trick the world into thinking we're going to war for spreading democracy versus serving self-interest. And so he did it so masterfully that the government brought him back and said, can you get people to spend? Because people are freaked out about spending. He says, I think I can. And so they used that particular experiment that you can go and research around cigarettes. And the whole idea was, if we can double the market size by getting people to consume something that they don't know they want, and to get people to physically want to hold on to things and let go of their fear of spending. If we can do that, then we can give birth to this idea of the consumer, which is how the consumer was born. There's no such thing as consumer marketing or branding. In fact, Hitler found out about his strategies, and that's how he convinced his people that Jews were bad. He used this strategy, so it's very powerful and scary. I'm going to speak about this at the conference. And to bring this back to your point, the idea of tricking people into wanting something they don't know they want is not the makeup of a technology person, because the inherent design around the work around a technology person is that you need me. So why should I be trying to trick you into liking me? So the fundamental idea, the foundational principles of a technology person is that you need me. I need to be focused on this. So why am I spinning stories? So I think that's the inherent kind of reluctance. It's like, why am I doing this? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is to be thinking about the evolving role of a technology person and how it has become a bit sexier, and you do need to kind of distribute its worth amongst key stakeholders in the business and around your stakeholder base. I would say that what you could be doing is helping people to know the value that your work has to their work. And then when you create that story, which I'm going to talk about from a behavioral science perspective, I want to talk about it at the conference from a sort of how the brain works, creating this sort of formulas or heuristics, these sort of shortcuts in the brain. What, people care about themselves. People care about their own survival instincts. And people are obsessed from an impulse and an instinct perspective around making sure that they leave something for their children's children's children. So if you can show people how what you're doing adds extraordinary value to their bottom line, and then you paint a picture around yourself, there will be increased demand for you in terms of a brand. And that's kind of the strategy in just in terms of a quick kind of snapshot. But that's the idea, is that the more politically complex things are, the more uncertainty there is in the world, you have to paint clearer pictures about how you impact people's bottom line. And the more you do that, the more the thirst builds in them. So from a principle perspective, it's important to, there's 1,000 different strategies, but from a principle perspective, you got to create an association with how your work impacts people's ability to thrive and survive.
And so the bottom line, and then also how the value that I bring makes you like propels.
Look better. Yeah, exactly. I mean, once that happens in people's mind, it's like people wear Nike. Let's use a brand that everyone knows. People wear Nike because they know they can't really do it. But then if they feel like they can do it, even if they put their sneakers on and then sit on the couch and they look at this sign and go, actually, I think I just did something. Even if they did nothing.
No, I can't really do it.
Yeah.
but I did it when I put it on.
Exactly.
Do you have any opinion? So I know you are also passionate about how our brains are impacted by technology. What is your view on children using iPads?
So my sort of friends who are a lot smarter than me, my neuroscience friends, I basically just am a neuroscience writer. I'm a few steps below the serious people. Like, I've got a colleague of mine named Dr. Tara Swart. She's a neuroscientist. She teaches at MIT. And all of their studies they're still evolving. It's weird because you'll read one extraordinary case about it's the best thing in the world for them, and then another one. So I feel like we're still early because these tools are so new. I mean, there are some fundamental things, for example, that what happens to the immune system and how you need to really connect with nature and how nature boosts, a number of chemicals in the body and what that can do to help you become more resilient.
Yeah, like the adjacent activities that being outdoors does for you, which being on the iPad doesn't
takes you away from. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think everyone will tell you that you need a bit of balance at this stage, and that kids have just gone, because parents are so busy, they just like, take this device and get out of my face type thing. That's the wrong approach. It's got to figure out a way to design a life for them, or spaces for them to have a bit more balance.
And what are you seeing in the so kind of shifting a little bit? What are you seeing around with this? How tech impacts the brain around tech innovation and startups, and maybe what you're seeing in South Africa, also maybe in the States. Are you seeing, like, I noticed the other day that Facebook's little notification bell in my mobile phone has now gone gold.
It's unbelievable what these guys are doing.
I was like, am I now supposed to, it's a shiny thing now, I don't have any notifications, but the thing is gold, so I'm going to tap it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, they are, I mean, this is all behavioral science. So all these companies are hiring behavioral scientists. There's divisions in Walmart for the specific person, kind of optimize how the economy of the mind works. So because people are overwhelmed with stimuli, they're putting out brighter colors. They're putting out things that, just trigger a more of an emotive response. And I think everyone should be thinking about this and recognizing that the onslaught of stimuli, you have to offset it with kind of brighter, more interesting things. And that's just basically it. But I also feel that technology provides an opportunity for more neuroplasticity, more rewiring of the brain. And I think that studies are starting to show, I was reading on my way here, that the ability to rewire the brain using technology and using sort of advanced sort of tools in terms of immersing yourself into technology that broadens the mind is extraordinary. So you can take someone from a rural area or someone, from out in the middle of nowhere and give them a sort of an enhanced, advanced sort of catch up, and it would literally trigger their brain to kind of rewire itself to catch them up. That stuff is powerful. And I think that's why I get so excited about technology and why I decided to work with the South African chapter, because I really believe technology is going to be the answer to a lot of social injustices, and it's exciting.
I mean, I talk about this a lot, but one of the big reasons I started 7 CTOs is because I want to work my way down, the supply chain of tech people, from those that have benefited the most, i.e. the CTO types today, all the way down to the disenfranchised, marginalized communities. And one of the inspirations for my story was when I read about a professor in Delhi who did the hole in the wall experiments, where he went to a slum and he installed PCs in holes in the wall. And he put a roof above it so that adults couldn't really, it was uncomfortable for adults to access these machines. And he observed how these children were working through challenges, mind exercises, and or computer, like move the mouse, drag this thing, can you make this turtle jump over the, and then his conclusion was that these kids were teaching themselves and kind of speaking to the brain rewiring itself. They went from never having seen screens before to arguably becoming kid programmers, completely self-taught.
Incredible. I mean, let me tell you a story that I think that you'll appreciate. Not long after I moved to South Africa, first of all, I overestimated my ability to understand the market and maneuver in the market. So for like 6 months, I just was like a deer in the headlights, literally looking around like, wow, some of these people don't even understand English, so it was just, so I spent some time mentoring, just sort of like, my partner, she was working, so in the middle of the day, I would just kind of like go into this area in Soweto outside of Johannesburg. And I met this young woman named Kanye. Kanye, a couple months earlier, had lost her mother and father to HIV. That scourge of HIV that kind of swept through Southern Africa around that time. It's around 2007, 8. And I locked onto her, and she was interested in coding and technology. And I didn't understand why, whatever. So I started this program called Brand of Brothers and Sisters. So I would take, along with her and some other her friends in this orphan ministry, I would take 3 levels. I'd have a professional, a college student, and then that preteen, which was her age. And I would have them exchange ideas. So we introduced her to a computer programmer and a coder. And so shortly after, they got her really interested, and she was one of the first graduates of the Oprah School. And now she just finished her degree, and she's been hired in the computer coding department at Investec.
That is me. That is my pursuit.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm introducing her to the South African chapter because I think the technology group and members can offer her advice, because she wants to start a program called Africa Girls Code. So what I've suggested to them is that you guys have this extraordinary experience. Maybe you can offer some mentoring to the girls that she works with.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it all comes back together, and it's, stories like hers excite me because she wants to give back now, and you guys have extraordinary resources in terms of brilliant minds, and I'm hoping that that's kind of where all this sort of comes.
That has to work.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, then I don't know what we're doing.
Hopefully I can bring her, what would be a dream? Imagine a part 2 of this podcast where she comes in with, some of your, imagine Yaku sitting there with her, and you guys, we all having a conversation about what they've been able to do together. That would be powerful.
That would be huge. What do you think she got from so you brought in the programmer, a student, a professional, a student,
a university student studying programming,
okay.
And then her with the hopes of I have no clue how to get there.
So what do you think the biggest impact was on her from these demographics that you chose?
Well, the whole idea was I felt that in mentoring, sometimes the gap is too large between a professional and a preteen. So to bring in a student studying it, you could ask questions about what are the current challenges and what I should be studying and all this. And then so the other thing we did was the professional offered, what we call a vocational day. So you would go into their actual offices to actually experience. The university students can't give that. And so I really genuinely felt that she got the real world experience of what it was like to study as well as to work.
So she got 2 points of reference, both as what it would be like to be a student and what it would be like to be a professional.
Yes.
That is insane.
Yeah. That was the whole model. And so
her world was opened up to, from being sort of this narrow, this is going to be the outcome of my life, to, oh, wait a minute, there's this whole other world that I can be a part of.
And the student and studying in varsity or university is not so far from me. I can access that. And then to be able to go inside of a company like yours and get a feel of, actually, this is not so scary. Some really cool people here. I think that's what helped her. And that program was largely designed by a friend of mine named Deepika, who I met because her husband is a partner at McKinsey. And so the McKinsey was offering this orphanage sort of support for their finances and their business. So that's how we actually met and we designed this program. And so she's much smarter than me. She's a PhD from Oxford. So she talked about structuring this.
I definitely want to know more about that.
Yeah, cool.
So my final question to you is, why did it take you 40 years to get a pet?
Let me tell you, in so many ways, I'm stereotypical black guy. I can't swim. I didn't like dogs. I'm like pathetic on so many levels. And so my girlfriend would always just ask, look, can we get a dog? And I always said no and just flat out refused. First of all, I thought I traveled too much and I thought she was too busy. And there's a term in Afrikaans called loskop, which means brain is scattered.
Yeah, like scatterbrain.
Yeah, scatterbrain. And so she called me loskop. I call her loskop. Like two loskop people can't have a dog. And so one day I came home from a trip and literally, she was sitting in the house with this dog and her shady friend. Everybody has a shady friend. So she was sitting there with the dog and the shady friend. And I knew the shady friend was the one who made her do this. So I just ignored both of them and the dog and I went away. And then 2 days later, she woke me up in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m, and said, this dog is sick. I'm like, well, sort your dog out. Your dog. It's not my dog. And she's like, no, let's go to the 24-hour veterinarian hospital. I'm like,
this is exactly why I do not want a dog.
So we get up, we go to the 24-hour. At first, I didn't know this thing existed. We get to this place and people are just crying and overwhelmed by this dog. I'm like, wow, these are strange people. So we get the dog back. Turns out her and a shady friend bought a dog who hadn't been dewormed.
Okay.
And so the dog was struggling. It was a Pomeranian. And we get the dog back. The dog is looking at me like, dude, can't you see I'm sick? Touch me, pet me. Anyway, I still didn't because I'm like, this is not my dog. And 2 days later, she traveled. She left me with this dog.
Oh my goodness. Now
the dog just literally would like sit next to me and just kind of give me this look. Like, I can see you don't want to pet me, but I'm going to give you the look anyway. And eventually I started petting him and brought him back to life. And then I went for a walk with him and he acted like he was so much better. He wanted to run and I love to run. So we started running together and she came back. She's like, I've been thinking about this thing and I really want to sell this dog.
And you were like,
there's no way, over my dead body. So now this dog is like my life and he's unbelievable.
Wow.
He's taught me so much about human nature, taught me so much about white people. I've never seen, dude, white women love dogs. Like there's a restaurant in Johannesburg called Tasha's. And I'm a big fan of Tasha. I interviewed Tasha for my work and she's just such an extraordinary woman. And so I go there sometimes and to just relax and observe and give her feedback. And there's a space where I can take my dog and sit outside. Dude, if I'm there for an hour and a half, at least 5 white women, nobody black, will come up to me. But 5 white women will come up and sit down and have a conversation. I've met my relationship with white women.
That is.
So now my partner wants to get rid of the dog, because she thinks
She's
I'm
like,
having.
yes, it's a chick magnet.
Yeah, it's a chick magnet.
Now, my wife is a white woman and she hates our dog.
Really?
Now, I've realized recently that the reason she hates him is because she doesn't want to let herself love him. Because she doesn't want to worry about him. And now we have 3 young kids and she's like, I cannot add another thing to my life.
Wow.
We got sort of conned into getting this dog by my 3 children, and I was the softie. But to this day, Kath still calls it the dog.
Really?
And she, we're trying really hard to make her love this.
What's your wife's background? Did she study psychology?
She did, yeah.
That makes sense. She just knows.
Boom.
She knows. Yeah.
Timothy, I'm amazed.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, man.
Absolutely.
This is awesome.
I feel like we scratched the surface.
Yeah, this is exactly what I thought would happen after watching these interviews. And I would say, keep up the work, man. It's awesome stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Timothy. Thanks for coming out, man. Cheers.
Wonderful.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the CTOstudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or 2 for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.